this for real?
You're wrong. You're in the well today because you broke rules of decorum. Wouldn't you agree?
Representative Pearson.
I believe I'm in the well today because you have put forward a resolution that says that it's more important to expel voices of dissent than do the work of justice, which is fighting to end gun violence in the state of Tennessee. I believe that I'm in the well today because I, with the courage of ancestors and family and loved ones in community, stood up and spoke up for folks like my classmate Larry Thorne, who can speak no more because of the proliferation of guns in Tennessee. I believe that I'm in the well today because you have decided that it is not right to have debate. It is not right to listen to the voices of the minority. I believe I'm in the well today because on the day that we wanted to honor the thousands of people who protested, we were denied that opportunity. I believe that I'm here because you feel in your heart that it is right to persecute someone who has committed no crime, who has only broken what you call the House Decorum Rule, which according to Section 19 of the House Permanent Rules of Order say that at worst the thing that should happen is censure. But instead, you have brought forward a terrible resolution to deprive and disenfranchise thousands of people in Shelby County of a representative who will and can speak and advocate for them. And I believe, Representative Farmer, that that is wrong.
I ain't scared of you motherfuckers.
You are listening to Conscious Fever, hosted by Carl Price.
Either way, I don't give a damn what you think you are entitled to.
Ladies and gentlemen, the moment you've been waiting for. So listen responsibly.
It's the best of the best. It's the one and only DJ Ice, Louisville's coldest DJ.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being here tonight. Good evening. This is Conscious Fever. I am Carl Price, your host here on Ice Entertainment Television and Conscious Fever Radio. Which camera am I looking at? Am I at this one? Okay, great. Please forgive my attire tonight. I am on this new defining myself and bringing myself back to the way I was 30 years ago. So sort of came from the gym. Hope that's okay with y'all. Good evening. Welcome to the show. We are going to talk about the inevitable, and that inevitable is mass shootings. The person you heard at the beginning of this show, his name is Justin Pearson. He is a legislator in the state of Tennessee. He works in Nashville, but he was sent there from Memphis. And he was one of the two that we talked about him last week. He was one of the two black legislators. Out of the three, there's two blacks, one white female, and the supermajority Republican legislature opted to only expel the two black legislators, the two young black legislators, I should say, because there's a number of black legislators in the legislature in the state of Tennessee, but those two young black men were expelled, and they are dynamic. I don't know if y'all really heard what he was saying, but he is one outstanding civil rights leader. I saw a sermon, and I just assumed from that sermon that he is also a preacher, but he's very eloquent in his speaking, and he's back in Nashville now. And the reason he's back in Nashville is because they were kicked out for complaining about mass shootings in this country. And in particular, the mass shooting that occurred in Nashville just a few weeks ago. Now, here we are in Louisville, Kentucky, dealing with the same thing. So anyway, welcome to the show tonight. I am Carl Price, your host here on Ice Entertainment Television, Conscious Fever Radio, Conscious Fever podcast. Thanks for joining me. I've got a couple of cameras here. I have no idea which one I'm supposed to be looking at, but at some point I'm going to look at it. I have no idea what's going on with my hair, and that's okay, y'all. I mean, I'm not gonna be all up in arms about that, but I am going to try to lighten some things up. Okay, so we are talking about tonight. I don't have the title in front of me. The title, I believe, is that it's time for us to talk about mass shootings. Of course, if you want to comment tonight, you can. We'll put you on Comment Central and discuss your comments, because we need to talk about these mass shootings. Because at this point, if the people that we send to places like your state capital or Washington, D.C., to really solve these problems, if they can't solve the problems, we can probably figure out what the solution is tonight and what the resolution is. So that's what I want to talk about tonight. I want to talk about the mass shootings. It's time for us to talk about it. It's time for us to stop ignoring it. You know, it was in Connecticut at one point, and we just thought, okay, you know, Sandy Hook was Newtown. I think it's where it was, Newtown. You know, that's what that was. And then it went to Las Vegas, you know, and everybody says the same thing. I watch it on TV, but I never think that it's going to happen here. But the one that happened here was really, really interesting. The one that occurred here in Louisville. Lots of heroic activity by the Louisville Metro Police Department. Unlike Uvalde, they actually went right into him. Went right to him. Just exactly what they were hired to do. Run towards the bullets. That's okay, because you have to save lives, and that's what you're designed to do. That's what you're there to do. So anyway, we're going to talk about that tonight. I hope y'all are okay with talking about that. I am back in another part of the studio. So I don't know how long I'm going to be here. I think that there are some other places that are going to be behind me because of where I am. So I hope I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. But in any case, I want to talk about this with y'all tonight. So if y'all would just stick around with me, let's have a conversation about mass shootings. See if we can figure out, hold on a second, y'all. Yeah. See if we can figure out all of those things that apparently they cannot figure out in Frankfurt. So stick around. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. This is Conscious Fever on Ice Entertainment Television, Conscious Fever Radio. I'm Carl Price, your host. We're going to talk about mass shootings. We're going to talk about specifically what happened here in Louisville. Be right back.
It's the best of the best. It's the one and only.
You can't handle the truth.
You are listening to Conscious Fever, hosted by Carl Price.
Now check it out.
I have wept and I have fallen. Don't you worry about me. 'Cause I stood up, yes, I have grown. The pain has set me free. And like a broken record in my head.
Welcome back to Conscious Fever, hosted by Carl Price.
All right, welcome back here to Thank you. Welcome back here to Conscious Fever here on Ice Entertainment Television and Conscious Fever Radio. I had to get through this show tonight, and I know we came on a little bit late, but let's just talk about this a second, okay? So many of you all now know that Louisville, Kentucky became the latest United States city rocked by gun violence, and it happened this week, early Monday morning. I'm here in Louisville. I actually sent a message through Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram that I was safe, because it actually happened down the street from my office and from where we do this podcast. So I wanted to tweet out because, I wanted to send that message out because I was getting a lot of texts asking, are you okay? And I wanted to make sure that everybody knew that even though that was going on, that it was not in my building, even though it was on Main Street. But Louisville is the latest city, right down the street here on Main Street, 300 East Main Street, to be rocked by gun violence this week. And of course, many of you all know now that this happened when an employee gunned down five of his colleagues inside a bank before being shot dead by the police officers responding from Louisville Metro Police Department. His name was Connor Sturgeon, a 25-year-old bank employee. And what he did was he entered the Old National Bank in downtown Louisville here and opened fire with you guessed it, an AR-15 style rifle. Now, LMPD officers responded to the scene within minutes. Hooray, hooray. And exchanged gunfire with the gunman. Okay? So we're gonna. Can you switch that screen for me? As I talk about this, I want y'all to see some of this. Some of what we talk about. I mean, these are the victims. I think what should be showing behind me, I can't see it, are victims of mass shootings. So you're going to see various photographs just continue to actually go by. But these are victims. These are some of the latest victims from Nashville, Louisville, and a number of other places. But anyway, he exchanged gunfire with Louisville Metro Police Department, and he was ultimately shot dead. And y'all know my feeling about that, right? I don't wish death on anybody, but anybody who does what this young man did, then I say, hooray, hooray. I'm glad they got him because I don't want the taxpayers. I'm a taxpayer. I don't want to pay for housing him for the rest of his life. But unfortunately, 4 victims died on the scene. And if you're looking behind me, you're going to be able to see those victims. But 4 victims died on the scene before a 5th one died in a hospital later on Monday. Now, the victims, all executives at the bank, have been identified as Tommy Elliott, Jim Tutt, Josh Barrick, Juliana Farmer, and Deanna Eckert. Another 8 victims were hospitalized, including 2 police officers who were shot by the gunman after responding to the scene. Now, one of those officers, Louisville Metro Police Officer Nicholas Wilt, he was shot in the head and is now, he continues to fight for his life in the hospital. I understand that he's getting better slowly but surely, but apparently he has a wrong task ahead. And about his story, right? His story is that he actually, March 31st was his graduation from the police academy. So he got his badge, got his authority, if you will, to actually be a police officer, literally since March 31st. And unfortunately, this is what comes with the job. So a lot of us, when we talk about police and we want to criticize police, this is a classic example of what police officers have to endure every day. I'm sure that young man had no idea that he will be rushed to brain surgery early Monday morning just because he was doing his a job. But here's what we all know about the shooting thus far. Now that we're heading into Friday, that the shooting unfolded at around, for those of you who don't know, it unfolded around 8:30 a.m. on Monday morning when this young man entered the bank armed with an AR-15 style rifle. And by the way, what's interesting is that I actually pass that bank sometimes. Sometimes I have two ways to get to my office. 2 ways to get to my office. One way, I can jump on 65 and get right back off at the next exit, or actually the second exit after I get on, and I can take that way, and then I will actually avoid that particular area. But sometimes I actually come up my street, which is Floyd Street, which sometimes would take me a little bit further back up Main Street or east on Main Street. And I'm glad I didn't do it Monday morning. I took a completely different route for no apparent reason. I decided to take a different route from 65 and a different route from just going straight up my street, which is Floyd Street, and making some cuts east. I decided not to do that. Little did I know that when I left at 8:25 that at 8:30 this was taking place. I did get a call from one of my brothers and said, "You have no idea. Do you know what's going on?" Just saw a lot of police officers heading up Market Street. I said, "I have no idea." Little did I know that right down the street from me, that's what was going on. But the bank manager, Rebecca Bouchette Sims, told CNN that the executives were gathered in a first floor conference room in the building for their morning meeting. She had joined the meeting remotely on Microsoft Teams. This is really interesting, y'all. The meeting was in full flow when this lady says, who, by the way, was a mentor of this young man, when she says that she saw the shooter burst into the room and open fire on the staff members. Here's a quote from her. She said, "I witnessed people being murdered. I don't know how else to say that," she said. Louisville became the latest United States city rocked by gun violence this week, So that was really interesting because he was actually, from what I understand, he was actually mentored by this woman that just happened to be in the meeting on Microsoft Teams, right? I know y'all familiar with Microsoft Teams. It's just like Zoom. And the interesting thing was that there was another lady there, and I may be getting this mixed up, but there was another lady who I believe was also a mentor to him because he had done an internship there. He had done an internship there for like 3 years, graduated from the University of Alabama. And they said he actually had some pretty good degrees. I think he had a double major, but he picked up his master's degree at the same time that he got his undergraduate degree. But what's interesting is that there was a lady that actually was another one of his mentors, and he shot at her. So, we can talk about, before we get too far away, about this, about how, why we find ourselves always blaming this on mental illness and try to shy away from the gun. But what this young lady said that was on the Microsoft team, she says, "I'm just as much in shock and disbelief, and was in disbelief as I watched it unravel." This young man was live streaming his shooting rampage online on his Instagram page. Now, the police received the reports of shots fired and a possible active shooter at around 8:30 a.m. The Louisville Metro police officers responded to the scene and exchanged gunfire with the shooter, killing him by officer fire. Here's what we know about this young man. He was a bank employee, was identified by law enforcement as the shooter that morning. And according to a LinkedIn account in his name, he had worked at the bank as a syndications associate and portfolio banker. The motive for the attack remains unclear, but the gunman is said to have left behind ominous warnings, some warnings about his deadly plans for his family and friends to find. The police dispatch auto released by the media captures the minute-by-minute police responded to the attack on Monday. In the audio, the dispatcher is heard relaying to law enforcement officials on the scene that Sturgeon had called a friend before the attack and left a chilling voicemail saying he felt suicidal and planned to kill everyone at the bank, quote unquote. The shooter had also written a note to his parents and a friend outlining his plans to open fire in the bank, according to what law enforcement relayed to one of the networks, I think CNN. But that particular source also said that the shooter had worked at the bank for over a year, but had been recently notified that he was going to be fired. Now, I want to stop right there. I mean, there's more fish in the sea. So that's why we need to talk about this gun violence stuff and think about these victims that you see in the gallery behind me. Now, the shooter's family lives in Greenville, Indiana, according to the local newspaper here. He graduated from Floyd Central High School, which is right across the river from here in Louisville, where he played basketball, and his father was a coach. He went on to attend the University of Alabama before moving to Louisville from Indiana. Now, several people have spoken out in shock that this shooter was behind the mass shooting. This is what's so weird about this. The lady on the Microsoft Teams live stream, she said she didn't personally work with him, but knew of him because his father coached her son high school basketball team. But she said she had never, ever seen any signs of violence or threats from the 25-year-old. She said his temperament is pretty low key. I've never seen the kid get angry or upset about anything in public. He was pretty much just relaxed, she said, describing the shooter as extremely intelligent and with just kind of a monotone personality. So a little bit more about the victims. The 5 victims killed this past Monday have been identified. I've already said this: Josh, Tommy, Jim, Juliana, and Deanna Eckert. And Miss Eckert is the one that died the next day, or later Monday night, I believe. Now, the first 4 victims, of course, were pronounced dead at the scene. All 5 executives at Old National Bank were in that conference room, and all these people were executives at the bank. Elliot, for instance, this is the man that is the friend of the governor. He was a senior vice president. Tut was a marketing executive. Barik was a senior vice president of commercial real estate, and Farmer, the biracial woman, was commercial banking. She was a commercial banking agent. And Eckert was the executive administrative officer. But 2 of the victims were friends with the governor, Andy Beshear, who spoke at an 11 a.m. press conference. And during an emotional address at nearby Slugger Field, he confirmed that one of his friends was killed and another was in surgery. He said, "This is awful. I have a very close friend who didn't make it today. That friend was Elliot," Mr. Beshear said. Elliot helped him in his early career and provided him little advice, or actually life advice, throughout their relationship. The governor said that he was one of the people I talked to most in the world, and very rarely were we talking about my job. He revealed that he banked with Old National Bank and formerly had an office in the building during his campaign for the Attorney General's office. Another 8 victims were hospitalized. I'm sure you all know that, including 2 police officers who were shot by the gunman after responding to the scene. One of those officers, as I've indicated, Nicholas Wilk, unfortunately, he was shot in the head. And this is the one that was just sworn in on March 31st. And he remains in critical but stable condition after coming out of surgery. 3 of the wounded have since been discharged from the hospital. Hooray, hooray. But will the lawmakers react? Here's what, of course, the president said, because we hear this all the time, right? Joe Biden put out a statement about the shooting on Monday afternoon. And he said, "Once again, our nation mourns after a senseless act of gun violence. Jill and I pray for the lives lost and impacted by today's shooting," according to the president. "Too many Americans are paying for the price of inaction with their lives. When will Republicans in Congress act to protect our communities?" Now, according to Senator Mitch McConnell, his office put out his own statement earlier that day. He says, "Elaine and I are devastated by the news coming out of Louisville this morning. Thank you to LMPD and our first responders for your bravery at the scene." That was a tweet. He said, "We send our prayers to the victims, their families, and the city of Louisville as we wait more information." Now, here's what's interesting for those of you outside of Louisville. You may not have heard about this, but in downtown Louisville, that same morning, there was another shooting. Shortly after the bank shooting, LMPD officers were called to the scene of a second shooting nearby. At 11:20 a.m., LMPD confirmed officers had been dispatched to 8th and Chestnut Streets, which is several blocks over from where the bank is. And police said that there is no active, they said there was no active shooter situation for people downtown to be afraid about. But we were very afraid. Actually, some of the buildings, some banks closed. Some of the buildings were actually locked down. If you were not meeting with someone in the building, you couldn't come in. So it was really interesting. But this was at 8th and Chestnut, and apparently there were a couple of suspects. They fled prior to the police coming. And I believe 2 people were shot, but 1 person was killed. So here we are. Here we are, right back at this again, right? And as I look behind me and y'all see what I see, right? Those are just some of the victims. We didn't even have enough slots on the wall in the gallery to actually place the Las Vegas victims. So let's talk about this. If y'all want to talk about this tonight, I'm open to talk about this because this is something that we really need to, we really need to give some serious thought to. I mean, we can send people to the moon. We can create computers. We can train a computer in artificial intelligence. We can do all of this stuff. But for some reason, it appears that we cannot, with all the power, all the skill, all the rational people, but we can't do anything about the threat of getting killed by gun violence that we live under every day. And as I say that, one of the things that I just want to put on your brain just for a second, I just want to put this on your brain just for a second. Everybody sitting in that conference room for that early morning meeting, I think that's a daily meeting. For that meeting, everybody who was in that meeting had no idea that the next mass shooting will leave them a victim. And that's what we live around, and that's the umbrella, or that's the cloud that we live under every day. I mean, every single day. I don't know, I might be next. And a lot of the news media, in terms of being a victim, of course, and all the news media is going to come and get this clip and say, here's a clip of him saying that he might be next, because it's so unpredictable. If you look at this particular shooter, and I'm sure the FBI is trying to identify a profile and look at this young man and study him as much as they can to come up with a profile to say that they understand how it happened. But it's a little bit difficult for this one. This Louisville one is a little bit difficult. The Nashville one sort of figured it out, but the Louisville one is a little bit different, right? Because again, as I tell you about this young man's credentials, first of all, he did 3 stints of internships at the Old National Bank, okay? So generally when you do that many internships, at least in law school, we don't get up to 3 because we're only in law, we're only trained by law school for 3 years. But if you clerked at a firm 2 summers in a row, it is likely that you're going to get a job, that they're going to keep you. And I suspect that that's probably the same behavior in the banking industry. He was in. Why he was getting fired, nobody knows. But the interesting thing about the fact that that was his motive, seems to be a little scarce, because here's the other part of this young man. There are no other signs. I mean, if you read the news reports, if you talk to people, or if you read them, if you look at the media and what they're saying about the situation, and the people that they're talking to that know this man, they said this is something they never saw coming. Now, his parents did say that they believe that they needed to get him some help, some, mental health counseling or something like that. But there was nothing more detailed than that. So the only thing that I can suggest is that, we're all sitting ducks, because if we're getting to the area where we cannot predict the behavior of these individuals with guns, then why should we still have this society with guns? And I understand this ideal of people need to be protected. I talked about fear, unsubstantiated fear, also last week. But think about this. Your level of fear, for those who this applies to, your level of fear versus the likelihood that you could be next. Right? Let me tell you what I mean when I say that. Let me clarify that. What I'm saying is that is my right to bear arms, the way we understand it today and the way we do it today, is that really worth waking up every morning not knowing whether you're going to personally know the next mass shooter? You know, I submit that it's not. I would like to see a world where, and I've said this many, many times before, and I know it's hard to swallow, where only police officers are allowed to carry firearms. If you look at some of the other foreign countries, you know, they don't have this problem because they don't have, you know, free willy-nilly laws on people carrying guns. I would also say this, that when you look at these legislatures, just think about this also. You look at these legislatures that are passing these carrying concealed laws without a license. That means if you don't have a license, that means that you don't have to be trained, right? That means you can just pick it up, walk down the street. I mean, obviously they are not thinking this all the way through, because if you're saying that everybody can carry a firearm unlicensed whenever they want to, of course, unless there are laws that prohibit them from carrying those. And this law that prohibits, for instance, I'm talking about convicted felons and people with domestic violence orders and things like that. But the hardest prohibition to enforce is those who have mental illnesses, right? I mean, the law is there. You know, if you're declared mental invalid, you know, you have a mental illness. There are state laws, there are federal laws that say that, you know, you cannot possess a firearm. But how do you measure that? I mean, I know they're stretching to say that this boy had a mental illness, but it's not quite there yet, right? Because, you know, like I said, I mean, maybe he deteriorated since he graduated from the University of Alabama, but he graduated with a bachelor's and a master's degree. A lot of us can't do that all in one swoop. But I want y'all to think about this. If you're making guns so readily available to absolutely everybody, aren't you really making those firearms available to the people that you actually fear? Because it's really fear that a lot of people have. I know this discussion about hunting and all of that, and I want to possess my firearms because all I do is hunt. And kudos to the hunters, right? I know friends who are hunters. More power to you. But if you're hunting a deer, I mean, can't you kill a deer with a .22 pistol? I mean, can't you kill a deer with a 9mm? I mean, really, why do you really need to have these access to these high-powered rifles? Right? I mean, if you're using an AR-15, for instance, and most hunters don't, but if you're using an AR-15 to actually hunt an animal, doesn't it bother you that you may hit other hunters that are out there, you know, by mistake and kill them? The only thing I'm saying, the only point I'm making in terms of the legislation is this, is that these legislatures that are passing these laws that says that, you know, we're not going to put a limit on what kind of guns you can carry. You can carry any kind of gun you want. I'm not sure how that is satisfying this ideal that you're fearful that if there are laws that says that you can't carry guns, then you're a sitting duck. And of course, that is true in some instances, right? You know, I mean, there's this argument out there with a little validity that says that if everybody in that boardroom had a firearm, that many people may not have been killed, right? If there was a security guard, okay, or if there were other employees that actually encountered him the first time, like this young lady, his mentor that encountered him and got shot. I mean, she didn't get critically injured, but she got shot. What if she had a firearm? You know, so I understand that argument. I get it. That was the argument for schools. Let's have teachers have firearms and different things like that. But here's part of the other, you know, the other part of the problem is that most people don't feel comfortable with firearms. mean, there's a lot of people that don't feel comfortable carrying firearms. So in any case, it's a good thing. But let me dive here to Comment Central. And let's look at some of the comments here on Comment Central. Mr. Hagan, the 2A has nothing to do with hunting. Yeah, I agree. And then maybe I'll ask you to explain the 2A. I'm not sure if anybody watching or listening to us actually knows. The 2A is about the right to self-defense and the right of citizens to fight against a tyrannical government. I think you make a really, really good point, John, and I'm glad you stated that, because I can get into this big discussion about the Second Amendment, but I'm not. I will refer you all to that very same discussion that I would like to have tonight, to an excerpt by the former Supreme Court Justice Brennan. He actually gave a speech once about the Second Amendment, and you would be shocked. You would be shocked as to what he said about the Second Amendment and the right to bear arms. It's not like we think it is. It's been overblown. And, I'm not sure what the answer is, but I know that I, like a lot of other people, when this thing hits close to home. I mean, this could have happened anywhere in Louisville, not on the street where my office is. But when it hits close to home, you just feel like a sitting duck. And there's almost nothing that you can do about it. I don't believe that people kill people. I believe that guns kill people. That's why you see at the top of, what you see behind me is why you see at the top there, at the end of the gallery, is that guns kill. It's the guns that are killing, and we have to figure out a way. We have to figure out a way to find some common ground with these firearms. And if we don't, we're all sitting ducks. When I go to church on Sunday morning, I think about that. I think about it when I'm in a grocery store. I remember that there was a shooting here, sort of a mass shooting here at a Kroger store on the other side of town. So I'm going to be honest with everybody that's watching and everybody that's listening. I'm afraid. I'm afraid because I do so many things in the public. I go to eat at a certain restaurant more times a week than not. And, somebody comes in there and just shoots us. We're just sitting ducks. I'm in the courthouse. Now, the courthouse is a little bit secured, and I feel a little bit more secured there because I believe that the deputies that are manning the magnetometers. I don't know what's wrong with my voice tonight. Anyway, but I believe that the sheriff are protecting us, and I feel safe inside the courthouse. But there's no safety outside of the courthouse, so long as anybody, can carry an AR-15. That's number one. Number two, I don't feel comfortable all the time when I'm in the grocery store. I know there are some security personnel there, but it's just one, and he doesn't have an AR-15 on his side, and nowhere close to him, or she. Go to the barbershop, same thing. Everywhere you go, we're sitting ducks. This is Derby season is about to start. Actually, this weekend, Derby season is about to start here in Louisville. Actually, some of the festivities have already started. And crowds of people. Easy target for a mass shooter. It's really scary. Anyway, I see some other comments. I'm going to get back to Comment Central. I think you might be responding to something I said. The fact that an AR-15 was used is irrelevant. Guns kill, knives kill, baseball bats, hammers, and cars kill. The man that died at 8th and Chestnut was killed with a handgun. He's just as dead. Man, totally agree. Totally agree with you, John. I don't disagree with you. And not one of those things kill without a human being using them. It's the person that kills, not the tool. Yeah, but here's my only response to that, John. My only response to that is that the person is killing with the tool. And without the tool, the person cannot kill if the tool is the primary instrument that's killing. I understand what you're saying. I am completely on board with what you're saying. I completely get it. But when you look at these stats, as you begin to look at the stats behind me, I don't know if they're going to show. Yeah, there we go. If you look at these stats behind me, I mean, then this stuff is real. This stuff is real. The definition of a mass shooting. What is the definition of a mass shooting and all of this? And yeah, so I believe that, it's just like a car. If we didn't have cars, back before Ford, well, actually it was a black man, but I'm going to give Ford credit. Ford for creating, the automobile society, people were not dying in car accidents. But it wasn't until cars came along. And it's the same with firearms. All I'm saying is that, listen, if you love your firearm, I love them too, But we have to recognize that the firearms in and of themselves are dangerous. And we have to have some better regulation other than saying, everybody can carry. Because I can tell you, it's great that I can carry a firearm and I can carry an AR-15 rifle. But if I'm walking downtown with an AR-15 rifle on my, wrapped around my body, and I see 20 other people doing the same thing, that level of fear that these laws that have been passed are designed to accommodate, that level of fear has just gotten worse. Just my 2 cents. Just my 2 cents about that. Okay, then, do we outlaw hammers and cars, etc.? No, John, we don't do that. Man, we're not going to do that. We're not going to outlaw those. But what I would say to you is that the hammer, the cars, and all of those have been regulated, right? A hammer, because you're in law enforcement, a hammer is a deadly weapon. It could be used as a deadly weapon. Could be a dangerous instrument under Kentucky law, right? So, there's some regulation for that, right? A vehicle, we have all these vehicle laws that regulates how we drive. We can't run a red light. We got to yield on a yellow light. We can only go on a green light, but we don't have that type of regulation with firearms. We don't have that type of regulation with firearms. Many of y'all know that I used to be one of the chief firearm prosecutors when I was a prosecutor. And in the course of doing that, the whole goal of that unit was to put people in jail for violating the gun laws, right? And we all know that there was a particular target. They were, the target of the program was really violent criminal offenders. But at the end of the day, we were getting individuals who, for simple possession of a firearm, which was illegal at that time, we were getting those individuals who were really law-abiding citizens, not really handling their firearm properly. So all I'm saying, John, is that I get it. I get it. I know it's a hard discussion to have, but we just simply cannot continue to ignore at least pursuing some types of solutions. Because when you look at these people behind me, if you can see the gallery, I don't know if y'all can see the gallery. Let me go this way. Y'all can see that gallery behind me. Go visit that gallery. It's virtual, but you can still visit it. Go visit that gallery. We'll put that gallery up on the Conscious Fever page. I'll put it up on my personal Facebook page or YouTube, but go visit it and just look at the faces. I mean, look at that young lady behind me now. I mean, she had her whole life ahead of her. Those people in Uvalde, I mean, most of those were kids. And we can't just sit down at the table and try to come up with something that works. Something madly wrong with this country when we can't do that. Here's another comment from you, John. The biggest solution to mass shooting is to build up the mental health resources. Name me one mass shooting not connected with gangs or organized crime where the shooter didn't have mental health problems. Well, let me marinate on that just a second. Let me marinate on that. Name me, let's just say, one mass shooting not connected with gangs or organized crime. I mean, this guy wasn't. This guy that shot up the bank on East Main Street here wasn't. I mean, he wasn't. So, all I'm saying is that I think, here's what I think about this whole mental health discussion when it comes to firearms. I think that's a scapegoat for people who really want to keep their firearms. And I know a lot of people don't want to hear that, but I think it is. And I think that's why they're trying so very hard to identify this individual to having a mental health issue. And, when in some respects, I'm not sure if he did. I've personally survived 3 shootings and one with my wife and kids. I never once blamed the gun. I blamed the shooter. Okay. You're going to have to elaborate on that, John, for me. But he did have mental health problems. It is reported that he had mental health problems. You want to know what I believe, John? I'm going to be honest with you, man. You know what I believe? I believe that that's the easy way. That's the easy way out. Just say he had a mental health problems. I mean, this was reported to the media by his mother, right? I mean, as human beings, we have a tendency when we are so close to somebody who has engaged in conduct that is extremely embarrassing, we have this tendency and this habit to say things and do things that separate us in our explanation, separate us from that person. And I think it's easy for the family, no pun intended to the family, because they're suffering too. This man's family that was, the shooter's family, they're suffering too. So no pun intended, but I think that's their way of saying that, he was not like us. I don't think he had a mental illness. I think that's just the way out. That satisfied the gun lobbyists by saying, he had a mental problem. But even let's assume for a second that he did in fact have a mental health problem. How come we can't deal with that? When we send people to the moon, we're figuring out all of these other things, the environmental problems and all of this stuff. We're doing all of this, right? And we're making people are making billions and billions of dollars doing it. So my question is, why can't we figure out how, assuming, if you buy the mental health argument, how come we cannot figure out how to consistently keep firearms out of the hands of the mentally ill? Right? That's the question that I ask. That's the question that I ask. It's the only question that I ask. Derby Parade 2016, I was 20 feet from the shooter. Yeah, I understand that, John. The Reagan administration destroyed the mental health industry. It has never recovered. Yeah, I'm not on board, man. I'm sorry. I'm not on board with just saying that I don't want to blame it out on mental health. I just think that's a scapegoat for people who really like this, this ideal of guns and guns and guns. I don't. But even if it is, let's assume, just for the sake of discussion and just for the sake of argument, that there's a mental illness that we need to deal with, and gun. How can we, or why can't we simply sit down and figure this out? Right? I mean, if you can figure out a way to keep certain people from moving in a neighborhood, if you can strategize a way to figure out all these things that we figure out. I have a lot of examples, but I don't want to say too many of them. But if we can figure those out, can't we figure out a way to divorce mentally ill people from having firearms? And the problem is, a lot of times it probably wouldn't work anyway, because if you're in small town Kentucky, you know Bubba has a problem. And you know the number one thing you should be doing in that town is making sure that Bubba never has a firearm. But Bubba's okay with the firearm because you don't think Bubba's going to harm anybody, even though you know Bubba's not all there. You know, that's part of the problem. That's part of the problem. You know, in my opinion, I'm just saying in my opinion, just in my opinion, one of the biggest obstacles to helping keep violent, mentally ill people from getting guns is HIPAA laws. Sure about that. I mean, you know, people who made the HIPAA laws can repeal the HIPAA laws when it comes to that. I just think that if really the problem is mentally ill people, how is it that we can't divorce them from firearms? We know who they are. Everybody knows who they are. When we talk about the police department, when we say this about the police department, for instance, we always say about the police department, well, you know who the bad cops are. You know, this wouldn't have happened. You know, Breonna Taylor wouldn't have happened if somebody would have told on the bad cops. Yeah, it's the same thing. You know, we know the ones that are mentally ill. You know, I know if I've ever heard anybody, let's say anybody in my family, I'm not saying that they have, but if it was somebody in my family, you know, related to me has said, you know, well, I'm just going to kill myself. Yeah, I'll be like, yeah, he probably shouldn't have a gun. Make sure that he never has a gun or she never has a gun. So I think that that's probably a start because we know who they are. I mean, we know who these people are. We go to church with them. We go to school with them. We go to work with them. You know, sometimes it's that person that you sat down with and you had a conversation with and you went home and told your spouse, you know, I don't think he was all there. But do you suggest that maybe he should be one that shouldn't have a firearm? No, we don't do it. There has to be a way that we can divorce, if the issue is one of mental illness, that we can divorce these people from firearms. Now, being in America, it's so easy to get firearms, right? So easy to get them. So I get that. But that's another problem that we should be able to solve. But when, you know, 9-year-olds are killed in Nashville and everybody's just tight-lipped about what can be done. And listen, I'm not suggesting that the solution is to take everybody's guns. I'm not suggesting that. What I'm suggesting is that every time one of these happen, we cannot glue ourselves to the explanation that this person had a mental illness, while at the same time claiming to have recognized that 20 years ago, you know, with Standard Gravier, right here in Louisville, we had the same issue in Louisville. We had the mass shooting in Louisville while I was still in law school. Again, I was right down the street from it. I was at the Commonwealth Attorney's office, and that happened closer to the Courier Journal building, the newspaper building, right down the street, right up 6th Street. So we've known this, but why can't we figure it out? Even if we accept the argument that it's only mental illness and not just this crazy love that everybody has for guns, let's just say it's mental illness. How come we can't divorce those people from it? You know, like literally, there might be some people that think, you know, I'm not all there. And I'm okay if there's a law that says, well, you know, this person has reasonable suspicion or reason to believe that you're not all there. We need to come and have you evaluated. Okay, I'll take it. Because even though I'm not in that class, if they do that to 100 people and 98 of them are not in the class, those 2 that actually should be classified properly as having a mental illness and should be divorced from having possession of any firearms, then look at what we've done, right? It's the same You know, I mean, we've kept those two people from killing a lot of people. It's kind of the same concept of, you know, in the justice system, you let, you know, 99 go before you convict one unjustly. You know, it's kind of the same concept. Anyway, I've talked a lot here. I'm glad I'm not on that other camera. But anyway, listen, I've talked too much tonight. I hope y'all have enjoyed this discussion. Really, thank you, John, for engaging the discussion tonight, because this is a discussion that we have to have. I mean, we can't, you know, when I look at these pictures in this gallery behind me, when I look at what's in this gallery behind me, one of the things that strikes me is that these people had no idea, like no clue, none whatsoever. None whatsoever. So when you go through this gallery, you know, on the first floor of this virtual gallery are those from Louisville. You know, this is the lady, you see the lady behind me now, she's the one that passed away later Monday night. He died at the bank scene. Those other two guys you just saw died at the bank scene. These are all Louisville. And in that gallery, they have them that way. And then there's a young kid from Nashville. How do you look at these pictures? Like, go through this gallery, look at these young kids, like up in Connecticut. Look at all these young kids in their eyes and say, damn, you know, we can't do anything about the fact that, you know, that we know this is going to happen again. And it's going to be a little girl, you know. So anyway, I'll just say this. While we're worrying about our little girls playing against little boys who identify themselves as little girls, while we worry about them playing in sports contests against our little girls, and we continue to ignore this gun epidemic, it's going to hit too close to home. And I don't know how close it really needs to come. I don't know how close it really needs to come before something really gets done. And the reason I say this is because I absolutely know that nobody wants to sit down and talk at the table, because presumably the NRA has taken a position that we don't negotiate our guns. So, you know, if you stay too far to that extreme, then you can never identify the middle ground, because you never go in that direction. Anyway, I'm glad you love the show, my friend. I appreciate your commenting and content and all of that. And again, my apologies, everybody, for that's going to hit me. John, can you take that way? Okay, that way. Okay. Anyway, I want to thank y'all for joining me tonight here on Conscious Fever, Ice Entertainment Television, Conscious Fever Radio, as often it is. And yeah, I've got to get out of here. Hopefully, I'll be back next year. Next week. I was just thinking Derby and next year all at the same time. But anyway, again, forgive me for my attire tonight, but I just simply did not want to change after doing a little working out. So anyway, this has been Conscious Fever. Carl Price on Ice Entertainment Television, Conscious Fever Radio.
You are listening to Conscious Fever, hosted by Carl Price.
See you next week.
I don't want them, no, get them all off me. Say that for L, she a cause, you see. 4 cars deep, we'll come through on a lane night. Chicken spot, wings and fries, we call that a day night. Lights on, so out, I don't have no stage fright. Knew that I was built for this forever, ever.
You are listening to Conscious Fever, hosted by Carl Price.
We ride Benz, 10 times 10, all my friends, this for real.
You are listening to Conscious Fever, hosted by Carl Price on 97thebeatfm.com.
I was born get a little tense. Like the river I've been running ever since. It's been a long time coming, but I know change gonna come. Oh, yes, it will. It's been too hard living, but I'm afraid to die. 'Cause I don't know what's up there beyond the sky. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Oh, yes, it is. Then I go to my brother. And I say, brother, help me please. But he wind up knocking back down on the knees. There've been times that I thought I couldn't last for long, but now I think I'm able, Father, to carry on. And it's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Oh, yes it is, yes it is. Said I know that a change is gonna come one day. I know a change